Welcome to Muscle Box Radio. I'm your host, Stephen Box, and my co-host is Michael Harrison. This show is going to be all about nutrition, training, bodybuilding, with loads of banter. We're going to be giving you the evidence, the science, and breaking that down with the help of some amazing guests and industry leaders to give you that application. So make sure you subscribe, and I hope you enjoy the show. Episode 15. So I just wanted to say apologies about the cliffhanger. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you are looking forward to this episode. It gets better. Martin certainly doesn't fail to deliver. The content is absolutely fantastic, and a huge thank you for Martin for coming on to the show. So we are now a week post-show. The whole of the Team Box guys did incredibly well in all of their classes. Laura, Dan and Chris, first time competing, held their own. They looked absolutely incredible and did me extremely proud as their coach. Mike did fantastic. He had a British invite and third place in the men's physique class over 182 in a really tough lineup. And again, really proud of him. And I was completely flabbergasted when I was told that I would be also invited to the British finals, as I came second in the classic bodybuilding. So I'm not sure what Mike's going to do. I know he's got a lot of commitments on, and I'm not sure if he is going to do the British finals. We'll find out in the next few episodes in the podcast. However, I am now full steam ahead. British finals in 4 weeks, and then the IFBB Diamond Cup in 5 weeks. So I hope you wish me luck, and I just wanted to say a huge thank you for everyone who supported the podcast, took time to wish us well, and just kind of supported our journey. It hasn't been easy launching Team Box and also this podcast along with competing. It is an incredible amount of work, but you know, you guys really make it worthwhile, and all the subscriptions, the downloads, the sharing really does mean the world to us. So again, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Now, one more thing I want to do before I get into the podcast is say that actually our doors are open for coaching. They opened up today, which is Friday. So we'll be taking our applications now for the next few days. Basically, all 5 coaches have 5 slots to fill for coaching. So there are limited spaces available. We're going to basically open the doors, and then when all spaces are full, that's them closed off, because we only work with limited numbers at one time. So if you would like to apply for coaching, we'd love to work with you if you're keen to get in shape. Depending on what your goals are, we will have a coach for you, which will be able to help. So in order to do that, just head over to the Team Box website, which is www.team-box.co.uk/apply/. So if you head over to that, onto the apply page, fill out that quick form, and we will be in touch with you very soon, and hopefully we can get the ball rolling with you. And again, a huge thank you for Martin for coming onto the show. And if you're interested in this MNU live course, then I also put the information for that in the description channels on YouTube and also on Facebook social media posts. So do follow me on Instagram and whatever, and you can find that there. So enjoy the episode, and I will be back with you next week when we've got a new guest on, another competitor who will be interviewing and talking about his preparations.
Yeah, this is my thing of like, actually, if you use the curve that I outlined, you can diet much quicker to begin with, and then
ease off the gas a little bit at the end.
Ease off the gas, and then you need to, when I think some of the rates I calculated, if you I suppose zoom into the article on Alan's review, you're down to about a maximum fat loss of something like 200 grams maximum a week. So if you've got people going into the final week still losing, even what's that, 200 grams, that's slightly less than half a pound. So if you've got someone losing half a pound or more in the last few weeks, they're probably losing a bit of lean tissue.
Yeah.
So it's unless some of that weight is coming from glycogen.
Water, yeah.
Yeah, so just bearing that in mind. But so I suppose this is where, and the whole idea of this kind of ties in with the whole idea of muscle loss. Is like, oh yeah, you will lose muscle on a contest prep diet, and it's like, look at the results of the new era guys. You know, you guys, 3DMJ, their clients, your clients, like you. These guys aren't. I mean, the most astounding one for me was Jeff's. The one where there was like it was a year difference, but he just dieted completely differently the second time or something. Do you remember that? And it was like, and someone even put their hand up and they're like, "What? You've gained 7 pounds of muscle?" You know, it was almost like a hint of like, "Oh, what's he done here?" But it was like, no, I just actually my body weight was no real different when I started. It was just that I managed to maintain more through a longer, more systematic approach. And I am a big advocate of doing some refeeds, doing some diet breaks, but actually putting in small surpluses there. You put in 100-calorie surplus for a day for weeks on end, and you're only gaining a pound or two of fat if it's a true surplus. So it's but you're in an excess, so that means that things are good, you are storing, you're in a more anabolic state. So yeah, you can, because of as well some of the new stuff on, or not new to me, new experiential stuff of some of the DEXA stuff I've got from athletes when they've been injured, the amount of muscle that you can gain from the muscle memory type effect. And actually I got a bit schooled by Dr. Lee Hamilton, or I say schooled, he was saying about some of the stuff I believed or thought I knew about satellite cell proliferation and the involvement of satellite cells. He was like, that's a load of rubbish. And I was like, excuse me, what? I don't know if you guys, did you see that in the mentorship group where he just came in? No. And I was like, oh my goodness. Like, that's just something that I've sort of believed for 5, 6, 7 years. And he's gone, yeah, actually, no evidence for it. And I was like, oh my goodness. But he said muscle memory, definite. But he was like, the involvement of satellite cells, maybe not. But anyway, so actually putting in these maintenance periods, refeed periods, little surplus periods, even like the gaintaining phase, which Alberto talked about, is like, if you happen to have lost some muscle, in my opinion, you can pretty much get it all back by doing a little, reverse diet, gaintain, just something within there. And it was funny when he sort of said, yeah, I'm going to diet for this long. But he was like, but I'm going to start in this shape. And he was like saying he was going to start in insanely good shape. And I was like, hold on. You've already started. If you're in that good shape, you've started over here. But it's like, where do you define your start?
Yeah.
And so for me, again, it's like, I do think people should be gaining significant is a objective word, but significant levels of body fat to maximize muscle gain. But actually, this is where I think actually if you want to get significantly bigger as a natural athlete, you do need to be taking years off. And it's where I went massively wrong. I competed year on year on year, and
so I got two questions off the back of that, and that was really interesting what you said and things. So obviously the typical approach of kind of eat clean in the week, then have a big cheat meal at the weekend to speed up metabolism, right? This is kind of like obviously a classic thing. Once I used to believe it. I used to have a large Domino's every Sunday, thinking that metabolism's coming up, thyroid, is gonna be fine, tickety boo, this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
As we know, obviously, it's pretty much that NEAT is the biggest factor that does drop through a calorie deficit. How many days is there actually any research to suggest that having a big increase on, calorie day or a refeed day will help with kind of TDE over the next couple of days, be it beyond just the kind of training performance in, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or is it, would a week be more beneficial to see some sort of benefits, i.e. if it is a sort of a lowering of cortisol that might happen, or influence on the thyroid, or even some of these other hormones that do decline over a prep? Do you think a week would be more substantial to do it that way, like aggressive, like the whole blasted and cruising approach?
So for me, this is a huge paradigm shift from where I was at with it, and partly it's coaching people into the belief of this, but I would have never ever done a refeed or a cheat or whatever people are calling it, treat for more than a day, more than a meal, whatever, because it was just, that's backwards, and I'm gaining fat, and if you're not going forward, you're going backwards, etc. For me, other than just if you're cycling your carbs for increased performance on a certain training day or whatever, a one day of anything just isn't enough. It just isn't going to do anything. Yes, you can carb up for the next day, but that is it. If you want to affect, and as you said there, with a one day carb up, you may get a slight increase in calories burned if you are, if your training is set, then it potentially isn't going to make any difference. But you might get an extra rep. But if you're using anything like a density training, or kind of you kind of you're guided by your feel, you allow yourself to have more volume if you feel good. Yes, you might get some more exercise energy expenditure. But if we're looking at overall, as you said there, things like NEAT and NENAT, which I think I defined in the article a bit, so like fidgeting versus kind of walking, you do need to be using, and there is research, if we look at kind of 3-day protocols, we can increase TDEE in that sense. The question is, which as far as I know, it completely remains to be unanswered, is by refeeding for 3 days, you obviously lose 3 days of progress. So is the beneficial up almost just taking you back to where you would have been if you had just done 6 days on the same? The difference is, again, this is going back to my kind of blast and cruise and doing things quickly and doing things in a nice, fun way, using some elements of the human makeup, in my opinion, of like people like extremes, is actually great. I was allowed to be in a surplus for 3 days and a bit of a refeed, and then I'm going to go back into a deficit, and that's a bit more fun than this.
Yeah.
So
I've had a client just do that. They're going away on holiday for 3 days, long weekend. So I'm like, right, first 4 days we're going nuts. We're going aggressive. And he's like, yeah, I'll fucking do that. Because he knows when he's away, he can enjoy a pasty in Cornwall, or he can have a cream tea. He can kind of, let his hair down a little bit and come back feeling like, then we've got 4 weeks, here we go. So yeah, it certainly it's appealing, isn't it, to people?
That's the art of coaching though, and it, one sort of thing's gonna work differently. I know some clients of mine, I go really low one day and then allow a little bit of a refeed the next day and do alternate days, so that they're only really having to work hard on that one day, because they know that the next day they're going to get a bit more food, and it's a lot easier for them to get through that one day, because tomorrow, I get to have something. Then next day, I'm going to push again, but then next day I've got something coming, rather than prolonging it, right, binge. Prolong it, and sometimes I think it just comes down to the art of coaching, and it doesn't have to be one set way with anybody, because I might do alternate day, and then I might say, do you know what, we're going to just drop it to 2 days, so every third day you're going to have one, and then you're increasing the calorie deficit that way, and it's still breaking the week up, and I think it's very, very individual, like everything in nutrition, right? Everything's all well and good on paper.
Yeah. It's just good for guys, I think, to know that if they're being told, you've got to have a cheat meal for this reason.
That's bollocks, yeah.
Yeah, and I think
that's bollocks.
It's just nice to obviously get Martin's opinion on this, to go, actually, if we do need 3 days or more, then it is that cost benefit of...
You mean that classic experiment that was carried out by the coach, we'll call him the coach, of the 2 double burgers, the double fries, and the ice cream.
Yeah.
I'm experimenting with that cheat meal, and it's working really, really well.
The word, Martin, was experiment.
Experiment.
People there going, the experiment.
I'm a 110 kilo assisted bodybuilder on 1,700 calories for 6 days.
My metabolism's really good.
But then this cheat meal is what's really really kicking in. Yeah.
We'll tell you after the recording, Martin, who it was.
Yeah.
But
Jesus.
It's just crazy, isn't it? The stuff that exists within the realm of bodybuilding, but also at the same time, within the realm of general population coaching. This is one thing of I sound like a broken record if I even say the word intermittent. But you know, like intermittent fasting or intermittent dieting or intermittent periods of calorie restriction, like heavy, rapid calorie restriction. And it's cool that you mentioned that, Mike, in terms of, yeah, one of the key areas of research now is like actually with an intermittent protocol, why does it work? Oh, is it this magical thing with IGF-1 and you know all the stuff that Michael Mosley bangs on about? It's like you go to the conferences, you speak to the professors who publish the research, and they go, "Oh yeah, it's because people stuck to it."
Yeah.
It's like, oh right, yeah. So the fact that you did the 5-2, it's not magical. They stuck to it, and it's like, yeah. So put that in the. I mean, I was tagged in a post yesterday, and it was like, you know, before Martin MacDonald, I never would have put someone in a crazy calorie deficit. I would have thought it was bro. I would have thought I was damaging their hormones. You know, this client has had amazing results. I've coached her back to maintenance, etc., etc. And exactly as you've said there, there's this whole, yeah, it needs to be lifelong changes, small, tiny little boring changes. I'll just have one extra lettuce leaf and just cut a bit back on that tea cake. And people are just like, I can't be bothered.
Yeah.
I want extremes. I want this, that, and the other. If you combine extremes with, as exactly as you said, the art of coaching, you tell them that, for me, it would be a case of you have to sign up for 12 weeks. I'm going to get you in shape in 6. You know, you only want to lose £5 or whatever, £10. I'll do that in 6 weeks. But then you're going to give me the money up front for the other 6 weeks where I'm going to coach you how to eat so you don't put it back on.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with rapid fat loss as long as behavior change is there, coaching is there, tools are given, etc. And actually, yeah, being able to help. This is the thing with Mac Nutrition. We have to help such a wide variety of people when we have clients. You go to someone, yeah, you just got to make little small changes. You're going to lose half a pound a week. Or you go, or even every single day, you're going to be a little bit hungry. This is the scenario that you've just said, Mike. It's like, or be hungry this day and don't be hungry tomorrow. And in my opinion, at least 50% of the population fit into the second scenario of I would rather not have this really just
or like 2 weeks on, 1 week off kind of approach. Yeah, whatever,
any kind of amount of time. But actually, I want to feel like I'm doing something. I don't just want to, where I'm at right now is totally different from where I thought I'd ever end up. But it is literally, don't weigh myself. Some months I might not change in body weight. Some months I might lose a bit. Some months I might gain. But I am on this I've been basically on a 14-month downward fat loss trend. But just trying to go, I'm just going to make slight little changes, rein it back in. But actually, for some people, it's like if they've got a really specific goal, I need to lose 2 stone. I'm the heaviest I've ever been, whatever. Not necessarily bodybuilding contest prep, because I realise I'm going a bit away from that. But because for that, it's kind of like, yeah, you need to be a bit more specific. But it's like, yeah, you can just hammer it for a week, go to maintenance, hammer it for a day, go to maintenance. And just, talking about some of the science, when I talk about maximal levels of lipolysis, how much fat you can get out of the fat cells and burn, when you talk about going above that rate, you talk about, okay, you're going to lose lean body mass. You're going to burn fat-free mass. So that doesn't mean lose muscle. That can mean, and often means, burn glycogen. Use carbohydrate, lose water, and you lose, those areas. And it's like, oh, your lean body mass has gone down. Yeah, but I've not lost any myofibrillar proteins.
Yeah.
And actually, when you go back to the next day, you've created almost like this bucket, this pool where you eat some carbohydrates, yeah, and you're getting kind of non-insulin dependent transport of glucose into the muscle. And it's like, oh, brilliant. I've eaten a meal and I'm back into fat burning zone, or whatever you want to call it, post-absorptive state quicker.
Yeah.
You're there and you're back. So it's, yeah, it's just cool to discuss it, isn't it? But again,
it'll be interesting. Like, I had a DEXA done kind of 2/3 of the way through my off season.
Oh, cool.
And I've got another one booked for the the cross reference or the retest the day before my next show. Which would probably be tomorrow by the time this gets released. So I'm getting my DEXA done tomorrow.
With me?
With Mike. So Mike's getting his first one done. But obviously I know the data that I ate in the day before and on the day of my first exercise. I'll repeat that to make sure. Because I was obviously in.
Will you be able to? Because you want to beat Mike. Maybe you need to do a little bit of a carb up.
Well, this is it. We'll be carbing up for the show anyway.
Oh, cool.
So we can try and obviously match those as best as possible. Well, for me anyway, from like test retest. So it will be interesting to see if I have gained any tissue or if I've lost, or to see essentially how my prep's gone for the last 24 weeks, and then I'll do another one in another six months' time to see kind of how much I've gained in that period back, whether it's fat mass. So yeah, it was just really good data points. So my question next for you then, Martin, as we will be...
Can I just jump in there?
Yeah.
It's just because I mentioned there about being carved up, and it's seriously cool that like now bodybuilders getting flipping DEXA scans. Like that's amazing. You know, it's like, oh, there's no research on this. It's like you guys are producing data that is going to create, you know, editorials, people like Lee Hamilton, people interested in bringing out new exciting research, going, oh yeah, being able to maintain muscle mass at, you know, 7% body fat, you know, true, or wherever you end up. And but this is a funny anecdote. I worked at a professional football club, and we had the funding where we could basically get our players DEXA'd 4 times a year, and then a bit more if there was any other. And that's why I mentioned about people regaining silly muscle in like 6 weeks. And they would obviously sometimes want to try and trick it as footballers. You know, that's what they're like. They're not interested in the data. They're just interested in being like getting a house point or whatever. And the radiographer was telling them, oh yeah, well, if you just want to trick the results, just dehydrate and like just don't eat a bit beforehand. And I was like, and then one of the committed players sort of said to me, oh yeah, he said we can. The lads are just trying to cheat, and they're like, you know, so and so tried to cheat and he came back fatter. And I was like, yeah, because he's doing the wrong thing. I said he should be drinking more water, carbing up, taking creatine. They were like, what? And so all the good lads, I was like, yeah, do this little protocol and you get insane results. I did 3 DEXAs in 8 days and did a pilot study, and I mentioned it. And it was like, it's so cool to see how you can just, you know, you can mess up the results. And anyway, so sorry, next question.
Yeah, well, it leads me on nicely actually, because we will be in, obviously next week when this goes out, we'll be in our carb up, in trying to fill out as much as we possibly can for the peak week. In peak week, we've discussed it on this podcast before, it's just as much about controlling as many variables as you can so you look decent for one day essentially. So in terms of, you know, something that kind of I asked at the 3DMJ seminar is this kind of concept of spilling over, and what it would actually take for an athlete to spill over so that there is significant visual fat mass. So I just kind of wanted to get your opinion on carbing up. What do you carb up with fats as well, or just, you know, keep fats to a minimum? You know, for example, if you're carbing up over, like, let's say a 2-day period for a show, is it better to be aggressive on one day? You know, just to kind of, you know, what would you do if you were to, you know, prep yourself or to prep someone else now?
Yeah. So yeah, it's a really interesting one, and this is where I feel like if bodybuilders sort of understood some of the science, I just sort of think, or I even look to the internet now. Oh, so and so's got his loading protocol. Is so and so does this protocol, and it's just like, it's how different can I be? You know, it's ridiculous. All it is excess calories, and a lot of the time just loads of drugs. And it's, you know, these are kind of like the big names within the, you know, assisted bodybuilding world. And it's like, if you actually understood the physiology of what's happening during this period, you can pretty much define the exact protocol and then just tweak it based on how that person might respond to a bit more fat and these different kind of things. So it's a case of, you can look at the numbers, and again, you'll never know, you know, no one's biopsying yet. You know, maybe that's what you guys will be doing next, like biopsying.
2 days out, muscle biopsy, yeah.
Yeah, hit a nerve, can't walk great.
You'll struggle to find any on you, Boxy.
Yeah, true.
Struggle to find what?
Any muscle?
Any muscle?
Wow. It's like that, is it? Wow.
Oh yeah.
It's on.
You're lucky you're just a guest, Martin.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like you two just going at each other.
Yeah.
So, you know, in terms of how much carbohydrate you can store, if you're somewhat depleted going into it, when you look at things like de novo lipogenesis, you know, making fat from carbohydrates. Now, the term spill over, like I never really understood it. I was like, what is this magical? Like, is the glucose like going under the skin and causing this water? You know, like what? You know, this is like an 18-year-old, like, what should I be doing here? And even, you know, I'm there looking there's a guy called Andrew Merrifield. I don't suppose you've come across him.
I've heard of the name before.
He's like it's relatively big time in the MPA. And I just remember when I competed in the Home First Show, Yorkshire, about 2000 I don't even know. But he rocked up. And like he's got crazy legs for a natural. He was he was sort of the beginning of a bit of an era of like striated glutes, and he was there with trifles, and he was just like bam bam, like 2 massive trifles came out. He was like vascular, you know, it was crazy. So then there was this whole thing of like, oh, I'm there with like rice cakes and jam or whatever it was at that time. But so anyway, going into like the carb up, it's a case for me of de novo lipogenesis, and we, you know, carbo loading for an athlete, we now know, you know, 10 grams per kilogram roughly in a 24-hour period, and someone is going to pretty much maximize glycogen levels. So it used to be like a week-long protocol in kind of the traditional sense, classical model of carbo loading.
Is that with endurance athletes who obviously already probably at maintenance or a calorie surplus anyway, so they're glycogen levels are going to be much higher than probably where me and Mike are sat at right now, obviously after dieting for 22 weeks.
Yeah, so this is exactly the thing of like, so you need to know roughly where you're at in terms of a deficit. So especially if someone's had to go pretty low carb towards the end, and I do know some people are able to end their preps on relatively, or not high, but you know, maybe 3-4 grams per kilogram carbohydrate. Well, I'm like, man, that's, how do they do it? Those metabolisms. But the case is, if you are relatively depleted, you've got stores in your body of, you know, anywhere from 5, 6, 7, 800 grams of carbohydrate that can be stored as glycogen. Yeah. And that depends on various factors, obviously, in terms of like body size, muscle mass, but then habitual diet. So if you are going up to these levels, you can get a shed load of carbohydrate into the muscle. And so if you think about that, 10 grams per kilogram, let's say you weigh 70 kilos, that's 700 grams of carbohydrate that you can eat in one day. That is, you know, being stored in your muscle, in, you know, not spilling over. So for me, the concept of spilling over can only be 2 things. One, if there's a massive fluctuation in body water and you do get some subcutaneous water retention. But kind of ignoring that side of it, spilling over is actually when you are shredded and you carb up too hard and you go into a calorie excess for maybe 2-3 days, or you do, you know, so many, you know, your calories are just way too high for a day or two, and you gain 200 grams of body fat. You know, it sounds arbitrary, but if you are in a massive calorie excess for a few days, you gain a little bit of body fat, and maybe that makes you look a little bit softer. But if you, so the issue is if you have got your carbs massively high, you're not turning those carbs into fat. You know, they're being stored or they're being oxidized. But you do need to keep fat, very low. So for me, the optimal stage physique, it would be something like looking at a maybe 4-day period before the show, using something like the day before the show to be in and around maintenance calories, you know, a bit up, a bit down. That's your kind of see where I'm at, make some adjustments. The day before that is a diet. So that is like getting a decent deficit, but very high carb, low fat deficit, and just bare minimum protein for muscle retention. Like it's a day anyway, isn't it? And then the 2 days before that are your massive carb up. They are, you know, you might not want to go 10 grams per kilogram because, you know, I'm sure hearing about some of your eating contests, Mike. But are you a big eater, Boxy, when you want to?
Yeah, in my off season I'm all right, but I can just switch off those. Yeah, I'm not fussed really by food.
Yeah. Okay.
Mike
so
is.
I've just heard Mike's a bit of a crazy eater sometimes. So he maybe wants to go up to 10, but let's say someone else wants to do a couple of days of 6, 7, or 8. So they're doing those and then if you spill over a bit, or let's say you don't spill over at all on carbs, but on those days you've hit 30 grams of fat each day, and those, because you've been in a surplus or there or thereabouts, you have stored those as. The other thing is you've got a small store of intramuscular triglycerides, so it might be, that you're getting some, it's not a big store, but it is there. But let's say you've got any fat gain, so you've 2 days, but you are full like crazy. You then do another day's diet just to, you might lose 30 grams, 50 grams, whatever, 100 grams, maybe even 200 grams of fat if you're getting enough of a deficit.
But maintaining glycogen higher.
Maintaining glycogen, exactly. You use that final day to just go either way, maintain tiny deficit or tiny surplus, and then you hit show day, and then it just doesn't flipping matter what you do on show day. Just get vascular pumped, and it's there's no messing about then. And even then, I suppose you could use the morning of like, oh, actually, I think I can just keep pushing the carbs up a bit, and you just in the carbs onto stage.
Because one thing as well, not only do you have this massive capacity to store a lot more glycogen, I think a lot of people think, but actually you've then got to take into consideration that day's TDE as well, because obviously you'll utilise glucose. So even if it is that sort of 10 grams per kilo, that's only just to replenish maximal glycogen, not even taken in consideration. So that's kind of your safety buffer anyway for actually, I would say, spilling over. So if you were to use, that's a pretty decent, I think, probably rule of thumb to go with. Providing you can keep protein in your fats down, like you said, to maintain calorie balance a little bit lower.
This is the other thing where it becomes actually, when you look at, you've got some of the pros eating whatever 1,000+ grams of carbs, and they are using things like baby food or like jam, and like it's like, oh, why are they using all these weird fancy foods? And it's like, actually you do need to pay attention to food sources a little bit when you're going that high on carbs, because if you try and do that from oats, that's a shed load of fat coming from oats, and that's gut distension central. But simple carbs, white carb, when I've done it with footballers in the past, we just pretty much change their food environment completely, because they're not the most committed of athletes, a lot of them, but we just go, okay, the butter that was there, we just change it all for honey and jam, all their little sachets. They can't get hold of butter, everything. We'll change the water to just fresh orange juice, so they're drinking shed loads, and it's just like, they are absolutely nailing the carbohydrates. Very low fat, very, very high carbohydrate. So it's, and then we'll flip around like what they're having for breakfast. So if there was eggs, we're flipping it around so it's a more carbohydrate or cereal based. So it's, but we're doing that without them knowing. But again, it's just that thing of, okay, how am I going to get that much carbohydrate in? And people, what, I'm going to drink, whatever, a litre of orange juice, or, it's like, do it. It's not like, again, when you get out of the dirty food realm, or glycemic index, or I don't know what.
I was obviously speaking to Rich yesterday, and he works up at Bath with like Javi, who's done a lot of research recently into fructose and glucose mixture with the uptake. So there could be benefit in having your orange juice with, your rice cakes, or, some just simple sugars or glucose as well. So, but no, obviously, thanks so much for kind of sharing all that. It's like, just brilliant. Just a great insight into how we can start to use science. Rich spoke a lot about basic things that you can track as a bodybuilder, just so that you can become your own evidence-based practitioner, because that's a lot of the time. You don't necessarily need to have a PhD to be a good bodybuilder, but if you're looking at data, using yourself as an experiment every single week, this is the data I'm collecting, this is kind of what I hypothesize, this is what I expect to see, and if you can continue to do that every single week, reflect, I think it is only going to improve the sport of bodybuilding and, you know, help people reach better levels of condition and all that kind of stuff. You know, so one last thing, and we're quite interested to get your opinion on this now. So obviously I've got a show in 2 weeks that I'm doing. This is from the date. And then I've got another show in 9 weeks. So would it be a hypothetical situation, and I'm sure you'll enjoy this one.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one.
If I went back up, you know, I'm happy with condition. I don't need to get any leaner than I am right now. If I went back up to maintenance calories, hypothetically, should I just maintain the condition I'm at until for those next 9 weeks? Or is it, you know, time to go up in calories for a little bit, then do an aggressive cut?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. And it's like, it's funny because we've had this kind of chat now, and it's like it sounds like you're doing really well where you're at in terms of energy levels. So it's difficult not to go just go to maintenance and stick there, because you're going to be loving life because that's going to be more, you know, a few more calories than you're on now, and actually you seem to be feeling pretty good. With an
extra like 300 or 400 calories, that takes me up to about 2,700. Like that's pretty comfortable. So. Yeah.
So it's like it would be, and then, you know, it's a case of, I think because again, knowing your situation, it's cool to actually be able to talk in specifics. You've probably not lost a great deal of muscle because of the way you've done things. So actually, you know, if it was a case of, right, you've got in great condition for this show, but we've maybe had to sacrifice a little bit of muscle or whatever just to get in shape. Well, we've got 9 weeks now. It might be a case of, like, you know, you do a diet break, a reverse diet, you know, anything like this to, like I've said, look at some increased training intensity, you know, rebound, muscle memory, get some muscle mass back with, and this is why this is where reverse dieting, if you don't take the kind of money-making spin on it and all that kind of jazz, the actual really beneficial side of reverse dieting is the non-binge culture, but is actually, be as strict as you have been during prep on the reverse, strict in terms of deliberate and measured and calculating, rather than just like how much weight can I gain. But in that instance, it might be, we're going to be in a 100-calorie excess every day for this little bit after this show, and then just come back down like that.
Yeah.
Or it might be you just do that for a little bit shorter, and so this is even easier, or whatever. And because in your situation, it's kind of a bit like, you could literally do anything.
Yeah, now I'm thinking what I'll do is I'll book my next DEXA for the day before my next show to see whatever I decide to do, and then we've got more records and data of... Yeah, exactly. You know, will I be on stage even bigger and fuller because I've been at maintenance? I've had a lot more glucose in the body and, you know, overall calories in that 6 weeks. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. But, Martin, we'll leave it there. I'm conscious of your time.
It's been brilliant. Thanks.
We may split this into 2 parts, perhaps. Because obviously it is quite a long show. And we've only got one listener, and he sort of says that, you know, past 45 minutes, it gets a bit boring.
How long have we been talking?
Quite a long time now. Maybe an hour and a half.
Oh, good. Yeah, wow. Time flies. Yeah. I didn't even realise.
Yeah, so I'll have a think about some nice titles and stuff, and get a nice picture of you up and things, and we'll do all that. But Martin, just thanks so much for coming on and sharing everything. And if you ever want to come back on and talk about more bodybuilding stuff, we would be humbled to have you on. So thank you very much.
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me on. It's been good talking.
I echo that. Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure and an honour to have you on the podcast.
So Martin, obviously, Mac Nutrition University will give it a quick plug. As we're all sponsored by Snowballs, aren't we?
We are. Yeah.
You can see if you watch the video on YouTube, we've all got the snowballs out. But the Mac University is pretty much sold outright for this intake. So where do they sign up for the waiting list for next year?
Yeah, great. So if people want to go and read about it as well, I find it's amazing when people have signed up for the course and they've literally no idea what they've signed up for. It's like, there's residentials, or like, there's a conference, or it's unbelievable. Mac nutritionuni.com. They can go and have a look there at obviously everything about it, like read the FAQs, and the enrollment. So the full with honours course is the one where there is the residentials. There's a lot of, we get to see people, help them with their practice, go through case studies. It's a bit more touchy-feely, as it were. We obviously do the body composition day, which I feel like for me, is one of the major factors within that, in terms of for people who can't necessarily afford DEXAs, or, as in DEXAs, you might have long breaks between them, but skin fold caliper testing, when you're really good at it, which is what we're going to make people, that's a big part of it. So a nice way to track body composition. So the full with honours one, obviously that sold out super quick. The fact that you guys took about half the spots, made it go quite quick. The full online, there's probably, by the time you release this show, they will have all gone, so all 100 places full online. But for the next one, there will be, they can go on there, and it's pretty much under where enroll would have been. It will say join the waiting list. We are basically, this is kind of my big announcement for now, is that we are going to do an April intake, a spring intake. So we're going to run 2 courses in kind of 6 months, and then start a new one, and there'll be separate courses, new students, new intake, a bit because we want it to be a learning journey for people to feel like you're doing this course with your 150 course mates, rather than it just being a bit mix and match, start whenever you want, and those kind of things. So people can go there, find out about it. Obviously, I'm all over social media as Martin Nutrition, so if people want to ask me questions,
yeah, I'll put all the links and everything in the description in when I post on Facebook, so everyone can find those links to the website, and they can start looking at stuff. But again, Martin, thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute honour and a pleasure speaking to you about everything. So
thanks for having me. Good chatting.
Yeah. Right, well, Martin, we'll leave it there, and thank you very much.
Cool. Catch you soon. See you, Mike. See you, Steve.
Cheers, Martin. Bye.
Bye.